Howdy readers and howdy film buffs. My name is Jason and this is Chapter and Verse. So this video is the latest in my Mortality project installment. I call the project or the class You Carry a Coffin Today. And most months this year we're going to be reading a book and watching a film together on the subject of death and talking about what those books and films reveal to us about the subject. And what we're going to be talking about tonight is the film of Jesse Andrews' novel, Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, which was directed by Alfonso Gomez-Rejon. So the first thing I wanted to do was to just talk a little bit about the difficulty in adapting a novel to film, to the screen. Some of us don't think it can be done well at all. Others of us think that it's a gauntlet, really, that the idea of adapting a novel for the screen just poses a lot of challenges, not necessarily logistical challenges, but one might say sensitivity challenges. So I wrote down a few questions here, right? So in adapting a novel for the screen, what is lost in translating it, in translating the story from one medium to another? Conversely, what might be gained from doing that? Can a film approximate or match the portraits of the interior lives of the characters? Because that's the thing, right? We tend to think that novels do a much better job of giving us the interiority of characters, why they're doing what they're doing, what they're thinking as they're doing it. Many people feel like that even the most gifted actors can't approximate that. They can't give us, through their face, through their body language, what is going on in the heart and in the mind of a character. I think a great actor can do that. And more than that, I think a really great filmmaker can do that, actually, with framing and with just various of their kind of directorial decisions, actually. I think Ingmar Bergman is probably the greatest filmmaker in history in giving us the interiority of characters. And then lastly, is there such a thing as a book that resists or defies adaptation? And can there be books that lend themselves to it? So a lot of people over the years, so there used to be a film producer named Saul Zaentz who would kind of commandeer these film projects, these adaptations of novels that were widely believed to be impossible to adapt, right? The English Patient was one of the films he produced. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I think. The Unbearable Lightness of Being, At Play in the Fields of the Lord. And so, I mean, as far as some of those go, so English Patient I've read multiple times. I've seen the film multiple times. At Play in the Fields of the Lord, I have read and I have seen. I think he also produced Amadeus, which I'm not sure was actually adapted from a book, maybe from a biography. No, it was adapted from a play, I think by Peter Shaffer, if memory serves. Anyway, and the thing that Saul Zaentz did as a producer was he found filmmakers, right, and people like Hector Babenco and Anthony Minghella, Milos Forman, who didn't really play by the rules, right? Who made films in new, innovative ways, in very fresh ways, and that could take a book like that was that deeply challenging and that kind of resistant to being translated to another medium, and make something special of it. This story, Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, I think it's important to note that the screenplay was written by the novelist, Jesse Andrews. And having read the novel a few weeks ago, I'm not sure if I have ever read another book that more lends itself to being made into a film. for a couple of different reasons. So one, two of the main characters in the novel are kind of aspiring filmmakers. And we read about these kind of spoof movies that they make, but it can only go so far on the page. Whereas in the film, we are given scenes from and kind of opening title sequences from some of these spoof films that they do. And what it does is it ratchets up the humor. It also does it goes a long way toward kind of taking us into the preoccupations of these characters, Greg and Earl. And it also, strangely enough, this idea of giving us these kind of mini sort of movies within the movie, it does a very good job, I think, of taking us into Greg's mind. And here I'm thinking about those wonderful animated sequences with the moose stomping the rodent, which is the analogy that Greg uses for when a beautiful girl in high school comes up to a kind of geeky boy and addresses him or touches him. And he becomes the rodent, she is the moose, trampling him to death. And so the fact that we have these cinematic tools, it allows us to kind of see not only what makes these two kids tick, but how their anxieties play out as well, which is fun to see, which is really, really fun to see. And the little movies within movies, for me especially, were just fabulous. Because a lot of the movies that they're spoofing, a lot of the movies that these two characters really, really love, are movies that I've seen many times. Some of them I'm not a huge fan of, right? But so Aguirre, The Wrath of God, the Werner Herzog movie, which is discussed in the novel and in the film. And then, of course, there's a documentary about the making of either it or Fitzcarraldo, another Herzog film starring Klaus Kinski. And seeing Greg pretending to be Klaus Kinski in the white suit and, talking about the fucking contracts, et cetera, on a film set. It's hysterical. And it's the kind of thing I think that teenage viewers and teenage readers they're just not going to get. So in many ways, I feel like the book and the film were made more for people like me, who are really big fans of independent film and art house cinema, and rather than your sort of kind of garden variety teenage viewer or reader. So as to the issue itself, right, as to the theme of the class of the project, Mortality, there are a couple of things I wanted to talk about. So I love how Jesse Andrews, in writing the screenplay, felt empowered to change the ending of his own story. In some ways, it feels like he recognized having the role of screenwriter as an opportunity for him to take the story he'd written and to do it better than he was able to do it on the page. Because the ending of the film, right, so as funny as the ending of the novel was, and I'm talking about the pep rally, the assembly in the auditorium, that's the scene in the book that made me laugh so hard. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. That scene isn't in the film. Instead, in the film, on prom night, Greg takes the film that he and Earl have made, which doesn't end up happening in the book, right? So the only film that they have made for Rachel in the book is just a disaster. It's just an absolute failure. They make that film as well in the movie, but they know that nothing can be done with it. So instead, in the movie, on prom night, Greg goes to the hospital to show Rachel the movie that they did end up making. And it bears almost no resemblance at all to their previous kind of spoof films. It's abstract, it's beautiful, it's dreamlike, it's luminous. There are certain music videos, actually, that it reminds me of. It reminds me a little bit of Samson by Regina Spektor. Also some of Tori Amos's music videos. And so they have done something for Rachel that is without precedent in their own kind of body of work. And Rachel essentially dies while watching it. She goes into a coma and dies shortly thereafter. And one gets the sense that she was waiting for it, right? That she was waiting to see if they could rise to the challenge, or I should say maybe that they would rise to the challenge and make something for her that could be conceived of as a blessing. It's almost as if the film that Greg screens for her, and it's so beautiful. The scene is so beautiful, right? I mean, he's dressed to the nines for prom, and he's laying next to her in her hospital bed, and it's projecting onto the wall at the foot of her bed. And it's almost like the film itself, the beauty of it, the ambition of it, the vision of it. It's almost like it gives her permission to go, which I think is lovely. And I think it's mysterious. And I think it's also very much so rooted in reality. One often hears about, for instance, people in hospice care who are waiting for a specific thing to happen before they let go, are waiting for a specific visit from a specific person, a specific conversation before they let go. And once that happens, they let go. And so I think the film does a beautiful job of showing how that is the lived experience of some people at the end of life. They're waiting for the thing that can function as a blessing for them. And I think that's lovely. And then the other thing, the last thing I wanted to talk about with respect to mortality or death, is this idea, right, that's given to Greg by his teacher, who's he's a fabulous character on the page, but he's wonderful in the movie. He's so wonderful in the movie with all of his tattoos and stuff. Is this idea that a life can continue unfolding itself beyond death, right? That we can somehow, through the death of loved ones, not only continue knowing them, but can get to know them better or in ways that surprise us, or pull the rug out from under us. And I think that's beautiful. I'm not sure I really fully understand it. I haven't been terribly close to too many people who have died. I think probably only one, actually, and he was a friend of ours who we worked with at Barnes & Noble in Missoula. He was one of the assistant managers up there, and his name was Vernon. And he was just a wonderful man. He was diagnosed, I think I mentioned him before on the channel, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. I think he was in his 50s. And he was a mountain climber. He was a great reader. He's a very smart guy. He's a very messy eater. And he read great books there at the end of his life. And I still remember the times that I took him to his chemotherapy appointments, and how we would just sit together and read. And I remember when Kelly and I were packing the U-Haul up there in Missoula to move to Casper, Vernon was one of the people who came to help. And that was the last day I ever saw him. And I remember him trying to kind of dig the snow out from under the tires of the U-Haul. And I remember him standing with all of us there in the apartment and eating pizza after we got all the kind of boxes moved and everything. And how kind of vibrant he seemed and how alive he seemed. And he was dead within 2 or 3 months of our moving to Casper. His cancer just hit him, like it just became something new, and it just hit him so hard. But this idea that a person's life can continue to reveal itself to their loved ones after death, it makes me wonder about all of my memories of him and those moments, whether they've already happened or whether they might happen in the future, where I'll notice something new in the memory, and Vernon will seem somehow larger than he ever did before, which I think is it's a very cool thing, and it's something to be treasured, I think. So anyway, that's me and Earl and the Dying Girl. What we're going to be reading and watching for next month are these. So in mid-May, we are going to be watching Fearless, the Peter Weir film starring Jeff Bridges. I'll be putting up my video on this, like I said, around the 15th of May, thereabouts. And then the book we're going to be reading for the end of the month is The Light, the Dead Sea, the selected poems of Frank Stanford. And this is a book I have owned for a very, very long time, and have only kind of dipped in and out of over the years. So it'll be really nice to pay as much attention to this as I'm sure it deserves. But anyway, if you watched me and Earl and the Dying Girl with me, please let me know what you thought of it in the comments below, and yeah, and we will chat there. I will talk to you guys again very soon. Adios.